right, folks. Well, we're going to kick off and we'll have people join as they come along. So, yeah, welcome everyone to this Colab event um, on driving execution as a product manager. Just a couple housekeeping for folks joining us on Zoom and also on LinkedIn. So, this event is going to be recorded. If you can just keep your microphones on mute, that would be great. But we do love to see folks with your camera on, and you can unmute when we go through into the Q&A section. And the comments area is for you to be able to engage and drop your thoughts, ideas, or questions, or if you want to hype things up as well. So for those that don't know, my name is Adam Davis. I'm CEO and co-founder of Colab. Spent a couple of years working in product management. So most recently, director of product at Product Board, Rightmove, Hootsuite, and Trade Me, where I've had the chance to work in a number of different verticals and different product teams. So super excited to be able to add my insight today. And I think one of my biggest things, and especially why really involved in Colab and helping grow it, is just passionate about really growing product people as well. So today, we're going to be talking about driving execution as a product manager. But before we get started, I want to talk to you a little bit about what Colab is for those that don't know. So our mission is to help champion the growth of product people from day one. So we really want to help on that learning journey. And how we do that is we combine participation in cohort-based programs with access to content and community to help product people and their companies scale. So we have a host of different programs for folks either moving into product management, targeted at entry level, moving up if you have more experience, and also moving together as well. So we do different workshops and programs to help more experienced folks. And we'll mention a little bit about this at the end. So today in this webinar, how this is going to work is I'm going to ask for your feedback in the Zoom chat. So you can add your thoughts at each of the stage that we go through it, and also leave a little bit of room at the end for Q&A. All right. So this may sound a little bit obvious, but execution and product management is critical, especially in today's environment. A lot of the feedback that I'm getting from product leaders and companies that I'm speaking with. A few things that I just want to highlight in terms of execution. It's critical for turning ideas into successful outcomes. It builds a lot of trust with senior management and wider stakeholders, and it accelerates your learning as well. I think two other items just to highlight in terms of why it's so important. It really accelerates your understanding of the value of your strategy and the direction that you're going. The faster you go, the more ideas you get. And then finally, it differentiates you against other product people, either in your organization or if you're interviewing for roles as well. So execution is really critical, and it's becoming even more important for product managers. So from what I've seen in my experience, and this is what we're talking about today over the last 10 years, is that there's really 5 key areas that impact the ability of a product manager to be able to effectively execute throughout the entire kind of product development lifecycle. And that's what we're going to be chatting about today. Now, when I refer to execution, I'm not just referring to delivering working software, but a PM must be able to drive execution at each of these stages to ensure that they're really focusing on the right problem and that it aligns with the company's strategy and what they're actually trying to deliver. So these are the 5 key areas that we're going to go through. So stuck in discovery, slow decision-making, lack of strategy and metrics, lack of team alignment, and unclear road mapping and planning. So they're kind of 5 of the kind of core key problems that we see. Now, for folks streaming in, what are your thoughts? Do you think there's anything else missing in terms of what are the main areas that might be impacting execution? What do we reckon? You can put it in the Zoom chat, or you can ask a question or add your thoughts. What do we reckon? Christian, what are your thoughts?
I don't see anything else missing from this list.
Good. Okay. Well, we'll jump into it. So the first one, I think this is probably one of the biggest ones that I've seen a lot in my experience and also the companies that I've worked with, is that many teams just get stuck in discovery. So they might have discovery lasting for weeks, teams blocked and they can't make progress, or frustration from leadership on the progress that they're making. So these are some of the symptoms that you might see in terms of your team. So you're constantly working on discovery, you're not able to make decisions. Other teams are kind of blocked on the progress that they're trying to make because you're trying to discover the right problems to focus on. We might be getting frustration from leadership teams in terms of the progress that you're making, and they're constantly asking questions as well. If you've got any other ideas in terms of what are some of those symptoms that you might see in terms of folks being stuck in discovery, drop it into the chat. One of the key things that we wanted to highlight was this great quote from Teresa Torres, which I'm sure folks have heard of before. And for her, it's all really focusing on outcomes over outputs, and especially in that discovery phase. So what is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? What is the clarity that you're trying to achieve? And how do you get there quickly to be able to execute? So when we're managed by outputs, we are asking our teams to build specific features, implement specific projects, or deliver on specific initiatives. We are dictating the actions of our teams. So when you're thinking about discovery, it's really focusing on those outcomes that you want to achieve. I think Valerie, yeah, really good thoughts here in terms of the opposite of stuck in discovery can also happen often no discovering, hurrying towards execution phase, which essentially means you don't know if you're focusing on the right problem. So that's a really good call out. So some of the key takeaways that I've seen, and also folks that we've spoken about in our community in Colab, it's about setting firm deadlines and time boxing. So when you are approaching discovery, leveraging existing data and subject matter experts. So especially if you're working in a larger organization, or even for smaller ones, when you're thinking about that initial discovery phase and the research that you're doing, leveraging folks internally, getting their knowledge, getting their understanding, and that will really help accelerate your execution. The third part is learning from real data. Now, we talk a lot about this in the industry, and it's a bit easier said than done, but really focusing on incremental iterations and using prototypes, using ways to be able to get something physically in front of folks, in front of customers or prospects, to be able to get their feedback on it. And then finally, this outcomes over outputs in terms of what you're trying to achieve. Love to know from this group, are there any other techniques that you've used internally in terms of how you fast track discovery, or how you've approached it with your teams to be able to make sure you can execute it a little bit quicker?
I think another thing that you must define is what processes or what part of your product needs discovery, and where it's clear enough to to execute a strategy, because you can also be stuck in discovery, not in terms of time frames, but in terms of outcomes. You want more outcomes and more outcomes and more outcomes until hoping to someone to solve your problem in discovery phase, which is, I think, a bit of a mistake.
Sorry, Christian, you got a bit of background noise here, but what was kind of the key point that you were mentioning?
I said that the challenge of staying in discovery too long until you have a clear outcome. The outcome cannot be clear enough for you. But I, if you did a discovery and you have an outcome, you must accept that this is the outcome, and you start to working on the strategy. I will try to type on the chat if it's not clear enough.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, there's just a little bit of background noise, but I think I got some of the gist on that. All right, so that's kind of the first key problem in terms of discovery. Now, another common symptom of not being able to execute quickly as a product manager is decision making, and making sure that decision making is unclear and it's not communicated. That's a real kind of large issue in terms of folks not being able to execute on it. And some of the symptoms and some of the feedback that we're able to get from our community in terms of what you might be experiencing internally if you are having decision-making issues is delayed project timelines, especially for key customers, or you're working in a larger kind of enterprise space. increase confusion and uncertainty with your team, not having that confidence in terms of what they're working on. Do they have the backing? Lower team morale and engagement. I've certainly seen this before where if you don't have clear decision making, this can really frustrate team members. It can really kind of lead to, I don't know, the feelings of not feeling valued or considered in terms of how the team is making decisions. Inconsistent decision quality. I think this is another symptom as well in terms of not making very good decisions and the impact it has on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And then finally, I think one of the biggest things is just impact on stakeholder confidence. So making sure that stakeholders have a clear understanding of the decisions you're making or not, and being able to communicate those. And we'll talk about some of the tactics that you can use to improve decision making in order to improve how you execute as a product manager. One quote that we wanted to pull out here was around decision making, and it's agree and commit, disagree and commit, or get out of the way. So making sure that a decision is made. You can't always have consistent consensus. You can't always have alignment. And this one's from Scott McNeil at Sun Microsystems. So to mitigate some of these friction points that you might be finding with decision making, it's really important for product teams to establish a clear, transparent, and efficient decision making progress. So some of the key areas that we wanted to highlight here, or I wanted to highlight, was around teams having full context of the problem and the customer domain. That's really important in terms of making decisions, so that when you're making those nuanced calls on use cases or problems that you want to solve or where you're going directionally, they have a good understanding of what's happening. There's a clear decision making framework that is well communicated. As an example, in one of my previous roles, we would always make sure that we document the decisions that we're making and at what time, and that we kept a log of that, so it was something we could go back to, and making sure that we had full transparency of that. And then finally, just regular cadence and feedback on the team's performance. So one of the things that we perhaps don't talk enough about is, as a team, how are we making decisions? What is the quality of those decisions, and what impact is it having? Again, kind of the same exercise. Love to know from folks here in terms of what are some of the things that you've tried to help improve decision making within your team to drive execution. Any thoughts from folks? There's no right or wrong answers here. What do we reckon? What helps you make decisions with your teams? You can pop it in the Zoom chat or ask. Right, we just had one here from LinkedIn. Oh, and Luke sent through clear escalation paths. Yep. Rice scores. Yeah, that's a good one in terms of why did we prioritize it that way. Good one from Brody here. Not just presenting a single option, but providing options with a preference, having a clear set of options. So yeah, certainly that clarity, prioritization, involving teams in that process as well. Great suggestions. So this kind of segues a little bit from where we were talking about in terms of the Zoom chat. But another symptom that certainly impacts how product managers execute is having a clear strategy and success metrics. So without having one, it can be really challenging for product teams to execute quickly. Now, as we all know, many teams do kind of work through this without having that clarity, but it's really, truly great product teams that have clarity and buy-in from their wider team and their stakeholders in terms of their strategy or what they're trying to achieve. So some of the symptoms that I've experienced in terms of not having a clear strategy and metrics or not being communicated clearly are constant questioning from your direct or wider team. You know, when you might get pinged a lot, you might get asked what's coming up, or your teams might be challenging what you're focusing on, or you might be getting different feedback from your sales and marketing team. And that's a lot of back channeling, right? In terms of folks might be asking your manager or folks on the team in terms of what's coming up. Another symptom that I've seen is regular kind of senior leadership check-ins. They're not generally sometimes helpful conversations. They're more kind of really inquisitory or questioning what's happening, just because that alignment and that buy-in to those strategy and those metrics isn't there. If you've got any other symptoms that you've seen in terms of what you've experienced, the impact of not having a clear strategy or metrics, drop it in the chat and let me know. So one of the key things that we wanted to call out, again, kind of metrics, one of the real key fundamentals in terms of getting that buy-in, getting that alignment, is that simple metrics matter. So this one's from Paul, founder and CEO of Keeper Tax, which is a less well-known concept discussed in lean analytics as a process in product development that they call drawing a line in the sand. The idea is simple. Before you release any product or feature, set a measurable target that will determine whether or not the release was successful. Again, this might seem quite fundamental, but it's a really important process in making sure that you communicate what's the goal, when is it going to happen, so folks understand how you're prioritizing and what your strategy is as well. Some of the key tactics that I've used and folks that we've heard from the community as well is just making sure you have a simple and consumable product strategy. Now, I'm not talking about a multi-page document. I'm talking about a one-pager or a two-pager, or perhaps a video demo overview in terms of what you're focusing on, what you're not focusing on. It needs to be consumable as well. You need to make sure that the wider audience has the opportunity to be able to understand it. Now, as an example, in one of my previous roles where I was leading our enterprise product strategy, I would have our main kind of product strategy one-pager strategy template, and then I would create different presentations in different languages to be able to communicate it in the right narrative and the right viewpoint for different audiences. So I'd have a different one from sales, a different one from marketing, but it would still talk about the key fundamentals that we're focusing on. The second point, which I spoke to there, is just well communicated and realistic. I think that realistic part is really about making sure the strategy is created by the team for the team. And that communication piece is also super important as well, right? Again, this is another thing that frustrates me a little bit about the industry where we talk a lot about ensuring folks understand your strategy. But in practice, a product manager really needs to drive that. They need to be going to all hands, they need to be going to demos, they need to be talking to people about the strategy and what they're doing as much as possible. The final component here, which is a great tactic to make sure that you're creating a realistic strategy, it's enabling you and your team to be able to execute, and that you're not getting blocked by senior management, as an example, is that it's connected to the business goals. You have a clear story of how you're driving it to really build that confidence with your teams. So there are a couple key takeaways that I've used in my career. Does any of that resonate? Have folks tried any of this and it's helped them with their execution, or have they tried anything else? You can pop it in
I
the Zoom
think
chat. Or... Go ahead, Luke.
potentially personas would help.
Yep.
So I think that's probably kind of consumed in the simple and consumable product strategy.
Yep.
But yeah, I think personas would help. Just make it relatable, make people understand.
And what's the type, like how, just kind of thinking out loud here then, Luke, how do you think you would use that? Like, could you give me an example of how you think you would use it to align folks, make sure that you're executing in the right way?
I guess taking them on that journey of taking the team through how a persona would want to use something specifically, or why they need, or why they have a need for a particular feature.
Yeah.
So kind of to help the team that's engineering it understand what is actually driving, I guess, that feature. It's not just some random request from senior management.
Yeah. Yep. No, I like that. Good suggestion, Luke. Yeah, what if anyone else tried any tactics or I guess have a go-to in terms of some of these takeaways here? Oh, we just had a comment on LinkedIn, and that suggestion was creating the strategy with the wider stakeholder group. That's a really good one. Put my light on. That's a really good one. And that's a tactic that I've used before where you're co-creating the product strategy with a wider group of stakeholders. So as an example, marketing, sales, customer support, and having their voice in it. That's a really good way to build that alignment and make sure that you can execute a bit quicker as well. Awesome. All right, we'll keep moving forward. So team alignment, this is certainly a thread that we've been speaking a lot about throughout each of these different potential areas that will slow you down in terms of execution. I think one of the key things to call out is as a product manager, whether we like it or not, it's really your role to make sure that the team is rowing in the right direction. And that's a key area that's really going to help you focus and execute as a group. This is a great one from John Cutler. We certainly love to reference a lot of his product thinking, and it's all about knowing your audience and also understanding that not everyone is aligned. What I really like from this is he calls out that alignment is overrated in terms of it can be a little bit of a waste of time, but understanding and clarity is underrated. The quest for alignment often yields mediocre compromises. The quest for understanding is much harder. We may need to agree to disagree or commit to something we don't agree with. And that's one of the key things, and I think a bit of a shift that's happening in terms of making sure folks are aligned isn't necessarily making sure everyone agree, but making sure that you're all kind of rowing in the same direction. Some of the key takeaways here that might seem a little bit more obvious, but they're actually quite challenging for product people are around making sure you have good stakeholder engagement. As I mentioned before, as a product manager, those different kind of altitudes in terms of, as an example, your product strategy, making sure your team co-creates it and that you're involved and that you communicate it together. That at a senior management team, they're involved and that they understand and that you're constantly providing the most kind of relevant updates for the audience that cares about it. Making sure that you have clear RACI matrix. For those that don't know what RACI means, it's responsible, accountable, supporting, consulted, and informed as well. That supporting one's a little bit of a new one added to it recently. And this just, A, make sure that decision making is clear, and B, folks understand who is making the decision and how you're going to be aligned to be able to move forward. And then finally, we've spoken about this quite a lot, but just regular demos and feedback sessions as well. What I would always make sure I did with our sales and marketing teams when I was as an IC and also as a product leader, just making sure that we're demoing what's the progress that we've been making every 2 weeks or every month, making sure that they're able to provide their input into it and that we also showcase what problems we're focusing on next and also the success of what we worked on previously as well. That's really important. So those regular demos and feedback sessions are really important. So I'm going to turn it back to the audience again. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about this. I'd love folks to drop their thoughts in. What are some of the things that you've tried to make sure that your team is aligned? It could be really small things. It could be coffee chats. It could be lunches. It could be team get-togethers. Yeah, let us know your thoughts in the chat or unmute if you want. Got someone linked in here, so making sure that you celebrate successes. I think that's a really good one, really important reminder. Anything else? Yeah, involving the whole team. So making sure that you've got design and engineering when you're making these decisions. It's certainly got a lot of decision-making context. All right, awesome. Great suggestions. We'll keep moving forward. Oh, we've just got one from Brody here. I'll just read it out for you, Brody. So if you run product demos as part of the sprint cycle, it's not just for engineering to demo product improvements, but for product design and others to share learnings. Yeah, that's a great one. And I think, again, that really builds that alignment with the upcoming problems and solutions that you're looking at. All right. One of the final key components that are really important to executing as a product manager is road mapping and planning. So probably one of our favorite topics as product managers, and probably one of the things that sucks up most of our time. But having clear plans and being able to clearly communicate them and give access to them is crucial to execution. And that access part is probably one of the cruxes of it as well. And some of the symptoms here that we did discuss, and they got quite a lot of overlap with some of the decision-making symptoms that we spoke about earlier, was just the constant questioning and communication from your team. Teams blocking one another, lack of alignment and conflict. So if you don't have a robust planning process, you might have teams working on similar problems or adjacent problems and not understanding those dependencies, which will slow you down. If you're not able to kind of clearly communicate your sequence, like one of the stress tests that I'll always speak to the product teams that I'm working with is, what is the story of your roadmap? What is the sequence? How do the problems relate to the other problems that are being solved by other product teams as well? So really important to have that alignment. And if not, again, these kind of dependencies, these conflicts, additional meetings are going to pop up. And then finally, some of the symptoms that I've also seen, and it really does depend on how your team operates, but just having a lack of visuals to bring it to life. From my perspective, it's really important for product teams to have some visuals of what they're creating. What does it look like? Again, that really makes it a lot more tangible for your audience to understand the problems you're solving. And I think one of the key things to highlight with this symptom is making sure that, again, you're flexible on what that solution looks like and that you're really clear on it. Another one from Pilcher, really an esteemed product coach, is that the product strategy describes how the long-term goal is attained. It includes the product's value proposition, market, key features, and business goals. And the product roadmap shows how the product strategy is input into action by stating specific releases with dates, goals, and features. So again, a really important component in terms of being able to execute as a product manager. Key takeaways on this one. I think this first one is actually super challenging, and it's around having a consistent and repeatable planning process. That consistency and the repeatableness is challenging for a number of reasons. Teams are changing, priorities are changing, org charts are changing. But a way to kind of tackle some of those symptoms that we discussed earlier is making sure that there's some consistency so that teams continue to get better over time in terms of how they're planning. Second part is about tools that are accessible to all stakeholders. So tools like Product Board, as an example, or AHA or Atlassian, making sure that you have the right tools in place so that teams can self-serve, they can ask questions, and then it frees up a lot of your time. And then finally, engagement sessions and feedbacks on the roadmaps. One of the things that I'll always make sure I do, and especially for the teams that I'm working with, is when you're creating a roadmap based on the strategy that you've outlined, making sure that you stress test it in front of prospects, in front of customers, and different folks inside the company to get their feedback on what's happening. And again, that will really help you execute in terms of being able to work with customers and then also execute internally as well. So for road mapping and planning, there's certainly a lot more that we can unpack with that. But again, turning back to the audience, what are some of the tactics that you've used to help improve how your teams plan and how your teams approach road mapping, depending on what that looks like for your company? What do we reckon? What's helped? Or what hasn't helped? Horror stories are okay as well. I'll give you 2 minutes for this one. One on LinkedIn here, which says making sure that you have a dependency process I really like that idea. Something that I've tried as well, where especially if you have a number of teams working across a larger product surface area, making sure that they have the discussions around what dependencies might arise from the work that they're working on. It's a really good one. Just give another 30 seconds on this one. Okay, two come in. First one, Christian, add research blocks of half a day or a day for the features that looks unclear to implement. Christian, if your background noise isn't too bad, we'll have a little bit more context on this one. So I think what I'm getting from it is making sure that you take the time to uncover the unknowns, perhaps. All right. While Christian types, we'll go to the next section. We can come back to you, Christian. So I want to talk to you a little bit about an action plan. One of the things that we want to make sure with these webinars is that they're practical and that you have takeaways you can take from it. So first thing, I just want to recap on why execution is so important in product management and why it's critical, especially in today. So it really helps you turn ideas into successful outcomes. It builds a lot more trust with senior management and wider stakeholders. We've run through a number of examples of how that can help. It helps accelerate your learning and your company's learning as well. And again, speed trumps ideas. The faster you go, the more ideas you're going to get. It accelerates your understanding of the value of your strategy and the direction that you're going. And it differentiates you against other product people as well and your organization, and also for new career opportunities. So it's a really important role of a product manager, and it helps differentiate the good from the great PMs in my experience. So there's 5 different steps that we've outlined that we hope are helpful for you as a reminder in terms of being able to diagnose and think about your own teams and the environments that you're working on. The 5 here, I'll kind of run through them and then talk a little bit about how do you get started. Because one of the things that always frustrates us is that there's these templates and these workbooks, but they're just too complicated. So I'm going to run through the 5 and then also some just practical tips on how you can get started. All right. So the first one is conducting an execution audit. So one of the things I would recommend is look at a project that recently you worked on or a feature or a product and evaluate to identify where are the bottlenecks or where are the delays occurring, and then start to look for some of those patterns or common issues that are causing those holdups. Sometimes what we'll do is we'll do and the teams that I've worked in, we'll approach it in 2 different ways. The first is we will do a retrospective on the entire initiative that we worked on, or we'll do some forecasting in terms of what's the name of it called again? You were doing a pre-mortem. That's the word. So we'll actually do a pre-mortem on what's coming up, what we think could delay it, how could we improve it. So conducting an audit to understand what you can focus on is important. Second part is about defining clear decision-making processes. So making sure that you have a framework that works for your organization. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want, but really making sure that you clarify who is responsible for which decisions and how they're going to be made. Example, is it consensus, majority vote? What's the timeline for the decision? And make sure that it's communicated to all your team members. That's super important step. Third part, which I won't dive too deep on, but just making sure that you prioritize it. So Luke had a really good example there, making sure that you're using a prioritization framework so that you can rationalize and focus on the most important tasks that are going to add the most value. Again, helping you execute and drive the results that you want to focus on. The fourth part is enhancing communication channels. So review and improve your team's communication methods. A lot of teams don't do this enough. There can be a lot of additional Slack channels, a lot of noise, a lot of inconsistency, but just making sure that you establish regular communication methods. So whether it's stand-ups, specific guidelines, or how you run meetings, so making sure that your communication and how you're organizing is set up correctly. And then finally, having regular review meetings. So making sure that you're reviewing progress, how you're progressing. This can also be async as well. It doesn't have to be in person, but make sure that you use these sessions to actually address those issues, update any team on changes, and then realign on goals and priorities. And I think there's been quite a lot of debate recently around the importance of meetings, but I'm a firm believer that if they're structured correctly, that if they're the appropriate time, you can achieve really good results. As an example, one of the things we used to do in my teams, if we were ever blocked on anything, we'd always meet that afternoon or the morning to solve it. And we wouldn't leave until we solved it because there's so many product teams and it's easy to get into that behavior where you're constantly pushing the decision, where you're not making a call. So making sure that you have regular review meetings. Now, there's quite a lot there in terms of the 5 steps that you can take. So what I would recommend to start implementing it is just begin with 1 or 2 steps rather than attempting to tackle all of them. So firstly, I would recommend starting on the diagnosis to do a little bit of an audit, and then you may have 1 or 2 pain points. So you might want to start enhancing communication first, or perhaps setting up just regular review meetings or how to approach it. So that's the first steps. First tip, start small. Second one, involve the team. Make sure they're involved in it. And then finally, make sure you're monitoring the progress because this is going to be an investment that you're making, but it should really help improve and elevate your execution skills. All right, and just to wrap up before we go to our Q&A, wanted to do a short little plug on 2 programs that we've got coming up for Colab. So our product management fundamentals program, which is designed to help folks who have no experience in product management or who are just getting started in their role to really develop those fundamental skills. That's going to be March 4th, based here in London and online. And then the second one is our advanced product management program. This is where we start to cover more of the topics that we talked about today to really make sure that for folks who have more experience in product management, how do they level up their skills and their capabilities to have more confidence and greater impact on the organization that they're working in. So we've got about 10 minutes or so for Q&A, 10 to 15 minutes. Would love to know if folks have any questions, and I'll turn this off here. Yeah, thank you for joining, everyone. Hopefully that was useful. Any questions on the topics that we covered or anything else regarding product management and execution? Hopefully that was helpful. Let us know in the comments. Christian, you finished your thought there. Awesome. So just to go back to Christian's point, so this was around improving execution in your planning. So adding research blocks, half day or day for features that looks unclear to implement. Yeah, so that's a really good suggestion, Christian. Just making sure that you take the time to remove the clarity on what you're focusing on. That makes a lot of sense. All right, folks. Any other questions? All right. Well, what we will do is we will wrap up. So, yeah, thanks from all of us. Thanks for joining this Office Hour London edition. We'd love to hear your feedback. So, yeah, reach out to myself or the team if you do have any ideas on topics or the format, because we're just getting started and running these, and we want to make sure that we're running them regularly and that they're valuable. So, thank you for joining us. And to stay up to date with Colab offerings, follow us on LinkedIn. That's kind of the main place that we post webinars, workshops, and programs that are coming up. So from myself and the Colab team, thanks for joining us and hope to see you soon. Thanks.